Shad, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Mr. Abela. A pleasure.
So you are kind of a household name in the crypto marketing kind of world. But tell the audience a little bit about you. And then we'll get into kind of the main topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is Rare Minds, which you just launched this week. But tell us
Yes.
about you, how you got into crypto, and the kind of like your experience in the crypto marketing space.
Well, first of all, Peter, thank you for giving me the distribution to be able to shill. We'll definitely be talking about that today in today's conversation on all things marketing. I really appreciate it. My name's Shad. I'm the founder and managing director of Giga. We are a marketing and brand agency. We've been in the space for close to a decade. Before that, I was just your average marketer. I started in politics, moved to e-com, DTC, SaaS, that type of stuff. I got into crypto during the ICO era. And nowadays we work with ecosystems, consumer protocols, that type of thing, spicy stuff.
That's amazing. And I don't know if you're able to share any kind of household name clients that maybe um would love to hear maybe some stories there. That'll give kind of people a less abstract kind of feel for the type of marketing that you guys have done. Anyway, if that's something you want to get into now, that'd be really cool.
Sure. Well, before crypto, it was the Conservative Party in the UK. I'm not sure how much impact I had there, though, as well as brands like Gymshark, Cloudflare, and some other like quite large, let's say, household names, real household names. Lots of paid ads, media buys, this type of thing. In crypto, the early clients was actually Consensus, so we were helping them with a lot of their ICOs. Back when Joe Lubin was like properly in charge, Consensus just started, as well as the OGs will know Fenbushi in Asia. We were quite big in Asia. We're doing Asian launches and things of this nature. More recently, so some interesting clients are like Venus, which is a money market. We help Uniswap DAO, which is obviously a big DEX. BitTensor, we do lots of interesting stuff with BitTensor, which is like the number one AI/crypto project right now. As well as sneaky stuff in the Solana ecosystem with web terminals and other money markets.
Sneaky stuff sounds really intriguing, but we don't have to get into it.
Oh, we can get into it. It's cool.
Tell us about Rare Minds. Well, first of all, you have a Telegram channel that I'm part of that is really fun, and you share it's called Shad's Mental Breakdown, and you share a lot of emotional stuff in there, and educational stuff. And you have a quite a popular Twitter account that I love, and it's very educational and fun. And you have taken all of that as well as the last 10 years of experience, and you've created Rare Minds. So tell us about Rare Minds. Like, what is it? Who's it for? Let's get into it.
So at Giga, we don't like hiring in Web3. Like we mostly hire from Web2. So a lot of our talent are coming from places like Saatchi's or Karmarama or Ogilvy or Pentagram, which are like these top agencies in the Web2 space. And a lot of those people want to move. But when they come into crypto, they're like super fresh. And we needed a way to take these copywriters that have 15 years of experience. They work with Apple, Rolls-Royce, Nike, Durex, these types of brands. And they need to go shill shitcoins on Twitter, right? And much more. And so we needed this like transition, this like bridge course. And so we built this education internally. And we're keeping it like close to our chest. We thought it was like our source, our, let's call it method. We call it the Giga Method. And then over the like kind of last 6 months, 9 months, I really saw a flood of new people coming in into the space. Lots of young, hungry, ambitious people that really want to make a dent. But I realized the biggest thing missing was this resource, which was just kind of people wrapping all their experience, not gatekeeping it, and kind of giving out the source, so to speak. And that was the idea. That was the idea behind Rare Minds. So Rare Minds is a platform for finding a job for employers to find like the kind of like hidden talent, the one that isn't on LinkedIn, the one that you find at conferences or in Discords. You know, they might be a bit introverted. And then we have our education, which is primarily focused for marketers, creatives, BD, and founders.
No, why would you give away like the secret sauce that has helped, Giga do well in the last, 8 to 10 years?
Mm, good question. I mean, like, it was a question for us internally of whether we should do it. It just became as kind of like in the industry, like the pie is just so big now. So like even if people use our own playbook against us, like that's okay. Like a lot of the power comes in the execution. So you can know the playbook, you can know the abstract, you can even understand how to apply the tactics. But unless you're able to execute at a really high level, unless you have that experience and repetition under your belt, it's not going to make a difference. And like for ourselves, a lot of our clients, especially our big clients, were people who are in our alumni network. They used to work for us. They learned from us, and they go out and become, like a CMO or CEO or found their own company, and then they hire us later on. And I realized that if like we're giving out this education, like arrogantly, it should have a positive EV impacts on themselves, on how much money they're making and the success of their business. And that's going to come in a roundabout way back to us, right? So it's not completely selfless. Like it's a selfish good deed. It builds our brand reputation. It builds my personal brand. It sets us as an authority, and it just gets us more clients as well.
I think that if you look at, big consultancies like the McKinseys of the world, they view themselves as the same thing, right? They've got, people join McKinsey and then they leave, and then they typically end up as clients back at McKinsey, when they enter the Fortune 500 force. And so I wonder if that's probably kind of the growth loop or the growth kind of flywheel that might start happening with Giga is you've got alumni that are joining projects and then they come back to Giga as clients. Is that something you've seen already?
A lot, I would say like 60% of our current clients are
That's
people who worked
amazing.
with us in 17, 18, 19.
That's great. That's I mean that's a huge success story right there. That's great. Well, tell us about Rare Minds. Well, first of all, so rareminds.com and then /courses/ the Method. So the
Yeah,
dash or that what is that? Hyphen the hyphen Giga hyphen Method. I'll put it in the show notes.
sure.
Anyway, so tell us about the Giga Method.
Sure. So two questions in there. Like, how do we conceive Rare Minds and then the Giga Method itself? I think I can screen share for the Giga Method. Rare Minds is a bit of a sad story. I'm not gonna lie. Back in like late 20 teens, we had a very successful recruiting agency, a side business. A lot of our teams based in Ukraine. I used to live in Ukraine. And up until 2021, the business was booming. The business was called Make It in Ukraine. You can go Google it. It was doing super well. We had clients like Bitfury, Zerion, KFC, Taco Bell, Fortune 500 companies. Like it was booming. And then the war starts in 2022 and the business basically just collapses. We lose all of our treasury. We spent it on aid, food, trucks, hotels, first and last month's rent, just team salaries, even though no one was working. And there was no more clients coming in. No one wanted to, everyone was worried about hiring Ukrainian talent during that first year. And so the business just collapsed, essentially. And so we had to fire 80% of the staff. And the 20%, four people basically came to Giga and acted as our internal HR. And we kind of had this promise that at some point in the future, when we were back on our feet, we would spawn it in a new incarnation. And like everything we learned, the Rare Minds team is four of them, Morella, Diana, Ivana, and Ms. Slipak. They always travel conferences. They're always on the circuit. They have a huge Rolodex of like top flight people, just like yourself. They're always kind of like free agents or can be at top projects and so on. And yeah, like we planned a rebrand. We wanted to launch it. At the same time, we were doing our internal education. So we're just like, well, if we put out education, that's going to be a great funnel for talent to come in. And like, most recruiters think about it like, I'm going to go find clients on LinkedIn. I'm going to pester them until they become my client. But we think of it more like acting agencies or model agencies. Like you want to go find the talent and then you represent them, right? And you build relationships over decades because they might go work somewhere for 2 years, 3 years. They've done their job, they've had their impact, and then they want to go on somewhere else. So if you have a Rolodex of a few thousand people like that is the business, right? And you're just keeping those relationships alive, slowly bringing in new people. So that's kind of Rare Minds in a nutshell.
Got it. So it's two. Okay, so we're talking about two things. So Rare Minds is the talent agency, for a lack of a better word. And then the Giga Method, that's the educational stuff that we're going to go through in a bit. Okay.
Sure.
I did not know that. That's really cool. Very cool. All right. Go for it.
You want me to screen share?
Yeah, if you're ready. Yeah, I think people kind of want to feel and touch and experience this amazing educational resource that you guys have built.
Thank you. Very humbling. Did the slide change?
Yeah.
Cool. So this is like a 5-minute quick deck. And this kind of highlights the whole thesis and like how we think about our approach, what it is, and like the details around it. Externally, we call it the Giga Method. Internally, we call it 60-30-10. And you'll see why in a second. So at a very high level overview, like we believe all marketing in crypto is composed of first mechanism, then narrative, then distribution. So mechanisms are the growth levers where the main network effects take place. Narrative is the communicative and visual layer in which you speak to the world, right? You highlight your mechanism, you sell it, you message it. And then finally, at the very end point, you have distribution. And distribution just serves those needs, right? The Giga Method, a lot of people kind of start with like this kind of idea of like a Discord group or some form of community that wants your token or your airdrop. And we believe that's kind of like the opposite of what you should do. You don't want overhyped launches. You don't want high mindshare launches. It's a net negative in the long term. And yeah, in this deck, we also go through what we build in this course. Look at this formatting. I really need to change this. So 60-40-10, 60% mechanism, 30% narrative, 10% distribution. So the 60% is like when we think of mechanisms, we're talking about like if you think of like Uniswap, you're thinking of the V3 contracts, you're thinking of liquidity modes, you're thinking of core fiscal policies within the ecosystem and how it works. You're thinking about where the network effect actually takes place for these ecosystems to grow. So in Web 2, a lot of network effect might take place when you onboard into an app, you add your contacts. If you share contacts, you get referral points, and then you have this kind of social viral loop. However, in crypto, it's when Balancer and Compound are using V3 contracts underneath, and then they go multi-chain, and then they connect with, the rest of the DeFi world with LSTs, CDPs, whatever it might be, money markets, there's loops, there's leverage. That's when you get true network effects. When you integrate with different stablecoin providers, when you have new money inflows, that's where the network effect takes place. So what we preach is the mindset of value accrual. Like you have a base layer. Almost every single project that's like true crypto has some sort of base layer, and that's where you're trying to accrue the value back to. And what's really important is that you roll it out properly. So you don't want to do like a big launch. You launch on every single centralized exchange with a big market maker or set of market makers at the exact same time. And then you launch your token, but you have no builders. You have no TVL. You have no apps that can take all that energy and actually use it for something conducive, right? So this is what we consider the 60%. This is basically the win or lose segment. If you mess this up, you mess everything up. Then we have the narrative, which is, most people just call it brand, but we think it's a little bit different in crypto, right? You might have heard of like memetics, cultural decorum, things like this, certain positioning. Our whole idea in the course is that you shouldn't go full Web 2 crazy positioning frameworks, brand reworks and things of this nature. You're not going through 20 different acronymed out concepts on FigJam. You do want to keep it like relatively simple, but you want to speak to all of your different audience segments. So like what we highlight in the course is that the standard crypto product has many different ecosystem agents, and all of them are extremely valuable. Most of them are complete oversight. So these days, what people mostly market towards are like holders. The elephant in the room is they want buy pressure, but you also have your ecosystem agents, your traders, your liquidity providers, your builders, integrators, core builders who come and work for the protocol, amongst many other different segments. And depending on who you are or what you are rolling out, it's like vital to the mechanism that you're trying to support for your narrative to properly do it. And then finally, we have distribution. We consider distribution to be the easy part, right? It's just a media mix. It's just channels. It's just tactics. It's just growth hacks, rolling campaigns. I think a lot of people on Twitter flip it on its head. Distribution is everything. And they focus on all these tactics and consider that to be the entirety of the marketing. Whereas we say, like, that should just be table stakes. Like, you have to be good at distribution. You have to be good at paid. You have to understand how to work with influence. You have to understand how to work on channels outside the bubble. You know, like, that's just table stakes. Like, the biggest protocols, we look at even crypto projects like Binance, like, they're partnering with Ronaldo. They're doing out-of-home campaigns with Glovo and Uber Eats, right? Like they're just, it's like there's so many different levels to it. So like distribution is just table stakes. Feel free to stop me if I'm absolutely like monologuing.
No, this is good.
So what shouldn't you do? What shouldn't you do is really in vogue right now, but we've learned from like 30 years of crypto history, right back to the 1990s, that you don't really want this. Like even in the 2000s and post Bitcoin, when there was all the color coins, we understood that if you go like community, as much hype as possible, straight to a token, you just fall off a cliff. If you think of EOS, if you think of Cardano, if you think of many other projects, think of modern day projects in the last 9 months, which I won't mention. It's increasingly obvious, and I think Laudio, which I'm happy to comment on, is the extreme example, right? They only focused on Mindshare. The whole mechanism was a Mindshare based mechanism. It was all about hype, a hyped community, a hyped token, and they instantly died. So it is like the most beautiful, eloquent, succinct, real life, receipt of what we're trying to say. And when I was making this deck, like Laudio was happening, and I was like, oh my God, this is so perfect. Like this is so perfect to illustrate the points. So
can we double click on that for a second? I mean, you'll get different views on this, right? Because getting attention to your project is really, really hard. And if you're the squeakiest wheel on the I don't even know what the saying is, but the squeaky wheel gets all the attention, right? And that's really what Laudio was. It was so squeaky and got tons of attention, but you're right. I mean, there was no mechanism behind it. And so it fell off a cliff. If there had been like an actual project with an actual product, maybe the outcomes would have been different. But getting attention is clearly very important and really, really hard to get in crypto. And so I guess, what are your views on that?
I would challenge the central premise of like attention being important, first of all. Like attention, yes, but like to whom? So,
okay.
Wait, did my audio stop? Because I was just fidgeting with my AirPods. I'm going to put it over.
You're good.
I'm going to put it over there.
Okay.
Peter warned me, by the way, for the viewers, Peter warned me. He was like, Shaddy, whatever you do, don't fidget with the AirPod case. And I'm just sat here flicking it open. So total addressable market for crypto, especially like inner circle CT, is absolutely tiny. We're speaking 5 figures. When it comes to builders, we're speaking 3 to 4 figures. Core integrators, 2 to 3 figures, right? Maybe capital, liquid capital. Like when we think of really high revenue generating products in the ecosystem, like Hyperliquid or Pump Fun, it's like 3,000 people generating 90+% of the volume and therefore the revenue. So when we say like you need lots of attention, like is that even true? Is that even true on the crypto consumer level? It's questionable. Is it true on the builder level? Absolutely not. People who are like outwardly shilling, it's the elephant in the room is you're shilling for buy pressure. You're shilling for market perception. You're shilling, there's lots of indirect benefits. Like if you have lots of attention, it's easier to fundraise. It's easier to hire, right? There's lots of indirect benefits from being popular. But at the end of the day, these are just aesthetic metrics. They mean nothing if you can't turn it into volume. So the graph in the top right, this is Barachain's TVL graph. And like if you look at the stablecoin graph, which is arguably more important because their main mechanic is the POL system, they're at like 120 million, sorry, in stablecoin TVLs of today. They've lost like over 95% after stablecoin TVL. And they had the most attention, the most mindshare, and a mechanism specifically built around capturing that liquidity, capturing all that mercenary capital from family offices, liquid funds, who all the BD did the legwork for, but they didn't have the builder capture, they didn't time it properly. If we look at the projects like really blowing up, they're projects that seemingly come out of nowhere. So you need attention, but it's correlated, not caused by your growth is correlated with mindshare and attention, but it isn't caused by mindshare and attention. So one project we work on in BitTensor, they were completely unknown until their mechanic flywheel like flew off the handle, and then everyone was speaking about them, and then their mindshare goes up. But they're not like getting the whole team to talk about their project. They're not doing loads and loads of KOL marketing or anything of this nature. It all comes naturally to them. It's all organic, right? And then like the third point, which I think is the most important, which most people miss. So many nuanced details here with like giving out 1.5% of your tokens to Kaito. I know you're a Kaito fan. We can discuss that in a second. But if you look at the projects that like really thrive, they're getting a super wide holder base who have all put their own money and invested early on when it feels like they found a gem. So it doesn't feel like everyone else is talking about them because, in markets, if everyone else is talking about something, that's probably something you want to sell. You want to find the stuff that no one else is talking about, the hidden gem. There's something that's undervalued, under-indexed. You go and find that, and then the community slowly comes towards it. You find the people that need to be found. And that's just kind of what tends to do better. Now, there's caveats. Like on this list here, we see Infinex. Infinex has a unit economy. They have switches. They call it swidges within their product. They're making money on their TVL if you use the swaps, if you use the integration partners. So they have a unit economy. It's just like a standard funnel, like in Web 2. So they're buying users. They're buying, lifetime value, and they just cost it out. So it's much more simple. But if you look at all the other ones on here, except for DeFi app, if you look at all the other ones on here, they're all ecosystems. So what do you need mindshare for? Why do you need hundreds of millions of impressions when your total addressable market is like hundreds in the early stages?
Okay. No, great point. All great points. Let's carry on.
Feel free to challenge me, Peter. I love it.
No, I do want to hear more around your thoughts around Kaito and attention in general. But let's get through the rest of the slides. I think this is good.
Sure. So what we teach, mechanism design, why crypto observes a power law. It's basically winner takes all, and why that's important. Why crypto is more like a scale-free network and not a social graph. So, the attention, again, a lot of crypto companies base their marketing on the premise that it's a social graph. It's not a social graph. It's a scale-free network. And we teach that. We teach growth levers, game theory, incentives, things of that nature. It's a must-have for any marketer, but sadly, most marketers don't study it. Then, of course, we have narrative crafting. We go very heavy into distribution. We look at not just English distribution. We look at WeChat, Line, Kakao Talk, Latin American networks. We consider out of home. We consider, growth hacking on TikTok, TikTok Shop, UGC campaigns, things of this nature. So we try to teach what most people aren't regurgitating on crypto Twitter. We're not looking at founder-led marketing. We're not looking at content marketing or specific tactics. We're kind of considering it all holistically within the media mix, within the marketing mix. Then we go through launches. So all different types of launches. We look at previously considered mechanics like reverse Dutch auctions, fair launches, launch pads, exchange launches, IDOs, blah, 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 blah. You get it, as well as how to launch products more aimed at like ecosystems or consumer facing. And finally, it's a little bit like of the meta, but a lot of people, when we're doing our focus groups on this, said, how do we progress? Like, how do we get better? It feels like I'm already getting capped. I'm at like a decently sized company. There's only 4 people in the marketing team, and I seemingly do everything. Like, what's next? We look at mental health. We look at what founders should do to grow. And then we also consider like the timing when you should work with agencies or in-house, which is a big question right now. We say exactly like who should hire in-house and at what point you should start working with agencies.
Now, you mentioned something in there. You did focus groups. You did some of the. Tell us about the research that you did to, I guess, test some of the content, because that's pretty unique. Most people don't go that, and it's clear that that this is like a key learning from the Web 2 space that you're bringing to the Web 3 space. Tell us about that.
So I wanted to make sure that this was useful. And I started just giving the curriculum and kind of like the raw data, the words that weren't, packaged in the course with homework and workshops and stuff like that. I just gave the raw stuff to people I know in the ecosystem, marketers, acquaintances. And so, what do you think? And they gave me their feedback. And, I would say 80, 90% of them never even thought about mechanism design. Maybe 40% of them are thinking about narratives, and like 100% of them just want to know how to distribute better. And when I told them like, oh, actually most of the course isn't about distribution, that's just table stakes, they'd be like, what? And so we go quite tactical. And then like what was surprising to me is we added this entire module in. You see, it says extra. We added this entire module in because a lot of people said this is really important to them, and that surprised me. Like marketers come into the space and they're like, where do I go? Who should I work for? What role should I have? How do I actually get better? And people were saying the craziest shit, like just the wildest shit on how they should get better. So we try to kind of define that through words, through data, in the actual educational process.
That's great.
I can move on. I think this is almost finished. Yeah, it is. So we go through like patience is the same idea, but essentially you want to work towards, compounding network effects, good governance, and being extremely lindy. That's the end state of like most crypto projects, and it takes, years. If you think of growth cycles, you launch an ecosystem, you have a mainnet, you then need builders to adopt it. You have to assume that, out of 100 builders that adopt, 90 of them are going to fail in one way or another, right? Which is true. It's just like facts. And then after those 10, you need like one unicorn. You need someone to do something incredibly innovative with the primitives that you offer. And that's when you have the runway effects. But for someone to launch a full business and for you to see the effects of that, it takes time. And sometimes it's completely, chaotic. Like you don't know what you don't know. It's randomness to which lets you win. Like what I say to people is, do you really think Solana was sitting around in a meeting room on a Zoom call, like, you know what, we really need to like incentivize a Jito-like company to be created so that then we can have like a whole trading ecosystem, so that like we can then create a whole narrative around meme coins. Like, okay, the first meme coin was in 2013, it was Dogecoin. But, in 2023, I think we can really bring it back with like a meme coin launchpad. Like, of course not, right? Like this was all just random chaos based on primitives. So this is what we stress. You have to play the long game. You have to know for a fact you're going to be alive in 10 years, and you have to plan for those like, long growth cycles, those long reflection periods. Some L1s like Nia were rebranding every 6 months, just like in the arena, testing. People say like, oh, Solana is out competing Ethereum. If you go to DeFi Llama and you look at the TVL and Ethereum, the capital efficiency of the projects, it's just a whole different game, right? It's like a whole different game. And so this is what we stress. You have to be patient. You're not trying to rush launches. You're not trying to do these big bang sexes. 9 out of 10 projects launching these days have like 20% floats. So like they'll have a $1 billion FDV, like $200 million circulating. And off that $200 million, the team and the VCs have most of it. You know what I'm saying? And like this type of stuff is just not conducive to these decentralized ecosystems. And that's what we tried to point out. Yeah. So kind of like this is for the whole model, because this is a deck taken from the actual course itself. But we always say history repeats itself. So the module before this, we go through 40 minutes of crypto history from the cypherpunk manifesto up until Kaito. And we say, history repeats itself. So there's lots that you can learn. Go and look at what's happened. A lot of people are coming in post NFT culture, or like nowadays, like in 2025, they're coming in, and you'll see like a lot of ignorance. They're naive to what happened before. Go learn what happened before. You're going to save yourself a lot of time and money. Second, always be mechanism first. If you optimize for Mindshare now, no one's going to speak about you in a year unless they reference your failure. There's many such cases. There's a huge graveyard. Third is, this is more about the actual course itself, right? So if you want to learn, apply it, teach it, get lots of reps in. If you want to become a better marketer, like just constantly implement, don't just consume, don't treat it like Netflix. And finally, patience is everything.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a great course. I'm looking forward to going through it and learning.
Thank you, Peter.
I mean, I'm learning a lot already with the 60-30-10 approach, because you're right. I mean, it's become a meme at this point that, distribution is everything. Distribution is super important, but what people, especially in crypto, miss is, the mechanism design piece, and then the narrative piece, and the holistic approach, I think, is really what's one of the most important kind of key components that people kind of forget. That things have to work together. You bring up the Solana example. I don't remember when it was, but it was very, very early in the Solana days. I remember a friend of mine led he was one of the community managers, and he also was the first person to lead the Solana hackathon, like with their first hackathon.
Cool.
And I remember his name's Austin. He told me, I asked him, "Hey, how's it going?" And he told me the numbers that they were getting with like number of submissions and applications and how many hackers were involved. And I had to take a step back, because I at that point I had not been involved in anything Solana related, but had been very deep in the Ethereum community, right? And I was so surprised at the numbers. Like, they were like so many people actively involved in the hackathon. That was the first indication that there's something special going on that I did not know about. I should probably like try to learn more what's happening here. And I think that was a really good indication that, at the time, Solana wasn't getting any mindshare, but there was a lot of developer activity. And I think that's a signal, clear signal. And you're probably getting the same thing with the BitTensor group community, lots of builders. Now there's a lot of mindshare, but it's the builders that came first. And so that might be a clue as to like which ecosystems might actually do well for the long term. It's like builders first, and then the mind share and attention kind of comes organically, versus like a contrived approach where it's like you try to get like superficial attention, which I think is what one of your main kind of arguments against Kaito and kind of attention kind of leaderboard type things is. It's like feels very contrived and superficial, right? Because like underneath it all is just kind of like cotton candy. It's like fluff. It's not nutrient dense at all. Is that a good kind of summary, or what am I missing?
I describe it like George Soros sponsoring protests in like Eastern Bloc countries, and then they'll all get driven in from a village. They're all wearing the same outfits and have the same banners and saying the same thing and just getting paid for it. That's what it feels like to me. Like when you're doing CT specific, like now that Kaito is branching out to TikTok and Meta and YouTube, like it starts to become a lot more interesting. Because now you branch outside of CT. As it currently stands, like just inside of CT, it is a colloquial circle jerk, right? You're all just shitting to one another, but you can see straight through it because anyone can see who's on the leaderboard, and all of a sudden you start speaking about this new project just because you want to get paid by it. And I would love to see the sell rates of the airdrops for like S Kaito holders. I think it's a little bit more like dangerous. So how to put it, like crypto when I joined was inherently nerdy, and it's migrating into a popularity contest. Initially, it was a popularity contest by capital, and capital would follow, what it thought was the best. But that wasn't always true. So if you remember back to like EOS days, 2018, they raised $4 billion. If you think about Terra Luna and Hashed, like there's so many debacles where people get it wrong. The smart money gets it wrong. Now turning it into like a sheer popularity contest feels like a mistake. Like putting an emphasis on content creators, short form content, things of this nature, when your true ecosystems just doesn't seem real, right? If you're Moonshot and you're, selling shit coins and your onboarding experiences through MoonPay, you can just use Apple Pay and you get $100 in Solana and you go shit coining. Sure, go sell it to kids who have been brainwashed by loot boxes and gamification and want to gamble on meme coins and be the 0.1% and make it. Like that's a good method. Attention makes a ton of sense. If you're like trying to convince full-grown adults, mostly men, right? It's like over 85% men in their 30s, 40s, and 50s to go build a sustainable business, right? A real revenue-driving business or something that they can go raise a bunch of money on in your ecosystem by doing like Twitter threads from, influencers or micro-influencers on Twitter. I don't think it's compelling. And I think the data shows that. Like a lot of these high mindshare pre-TG launches coming through that leaderboard, they don't have that traction. You can go to their Dune dashboards. You can look at DeFi Llama. It drops off a cliff and they lose their mindshare. I would say there's like a caveat. So the caveat is like if you're Infinex or DeFi app, it's the best thing ever because it's just a new funnel. And, you have a cost per acquisition, right? And your lifetime value of a user, and you have referral systems, right? And so it makes a ton of sense. But if you're targeting like 500 people around the world, 500 potential entities, like I'm not sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. The cost acquisition piece, when you actually have a user, and when your user is not a developer, I think that's kind of the key. And so maybe Kaito is really good for kind of like B2C projects.
100%.
B2D, definitely probably not. And especially for projects that have some kind of revenue generating flywheel, then you can have a cost acquisition, lifetime value, actual metrics. But that would be a very interesting chart to see. A Dune dashboard relative to like Mindshare, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to, do you have Kaito Pro?
I do.
Don't know if you can pull it up in the background, but if you go to Hyperliquid on Kaito Pro, you'll see in like 2024 when they had the highest mindshare, their price action's the worst, and it's when they had a debacle. And so the sentiment goes really down, the mindshare is really high, and the price action just like falls off a cliff. So like high mindshare in a vacuum, you also want good sentiment to go along with it, and for consumer priorities. So there's like other things to take into account here. But ultimately, like it's just pockets. Like again, like for crypto specifically, but even similar business models like iGaming or casinos, it's the whales that you drive all the revenue, right? It's that's who you get VIP status for. When you go mega long tail, if you're going super mass market and you're onboarding like literally millions, tens of millions of people, like sure, like do it. Telegram doesn't even appear on the Kaito Mindshare boards, but like it has 1 billion daily active users. It has the most distribution out of any crypto product. Tether doesn't appear on the Mindshare leaderboard, but it prints more money than BlackRock, right?
Yeah,
Binance
that's a
doesn't
good
appear on the
point.
Mindshare leaderboard. So like, Binance is advertising on Formula One, on billboards with Ronaldo, on your grocery store bags, on your delivery food bags. Like that's the distribution you want. Those are the campaigns you want to do. But UGC is great. Like we
Yeah.
use UGC. Yeah.
No, really good point. And my other criticism of Kaido is it's heavily imbalanced towards attention, and we know what gets attention. Attention is like if there's a Twitter spat or some kind of fight that gets a lot of attention, but high quality threads typically don't. And so there's a very kind of imbalanced approach, and that's been my criticism. And I've told you who this that it's it, I I've called Kaito, it's like the page rank of like 2010. And back then, you could get backlinks into your website, into your pages, and it would get ranked really highly. And I gamed the whole thing, right? And it was very easy to game, and I made a lot of money doing that. And it's the same thing is happening today. It's like, but instead of backlinks, you've got, the Kaito leaderboard. And we know like you can engineer it, but what gets left behind is like high quality threads. And so what did Google have to do? It introduced Penguin and then Panda, which then slashed a lot of these websites, and a lot of these websites were deranked or became like just disappeared, because they discovered that all these backlinks were either bought for or engineered somehow. And at some point, Kaito's going to have some kind of reckoning that they've really ignored quality, and it's with a over indexed on attention. So who knows?
It's good. I mean, I shit on Kaito a lot publicly, but like to give them credit publicly, they took, I mean, like if you consider like, okay, so first of all, like InfoFi, like what about Nansen and these companies came way before, offer arguably like potentially way more value. This might be debatable. Delphi, different companies offering data, information, but Kaito, extremely boring technology, mostly focused on founders, researchers, and marketers. Very high priced, high friction, single metric black box. They don't explain what happens. They convince a lot of people to go and buy it. They created an entire meta. Like you who coined an entire meta, which is what we speak about in our course. It's like the best case scenario where you create a meta such that all your competitors, a whole industry tries to compete against you. So now we see Cookie trying to compete against Kaito. Everyone else is putting InfoFi in their bio. So like that's like the pinnacle of success in marketing and crypto. You who did that. He combined B2B with consumer. So then he introduced the apps and point systems and crypto-like metrics, but on an individual level. So he gets everyone involved, including KOLs, which acts as his distribution mechanism. They spend nothing on ads. It's all for free. Then he did a huge token launch after all the momentum, after the revenue, after all of this. Then he did a token launch, which launched at a 10-figure FDV. Pretty epic. And he built in mechanics to bury that liquidity. ST Kaito, airdrops from other projects, right? This is like pinnacle of crypto marketing. It's like so brilliant. Fucking smart. It's brilliant. Yeah. And on top of that, he goes one step further when he starts integrating projects like Laudio. So he has like network effects at the builder level. Go and take my Mindshare primitive and go build something interesting, like noise, right? It's like, so like our course, like if you look at Kaito, like it's actually like our course teaches you go and do what Kaito did as a business. You know what I'm saying? Like it's perfection. It's absolute perfection. I would say the only misstep was they have also a downward flywheel. So for example, if companies stop paying for Mindshare and airdrops, then ST Kaito becomes less valuable. People unstake, people sell, and you have a rapid cascading sell-off, which can be really dangerous for projects like that, right?
Yeah.
And they try to force usage of Kaito through payments. So, or you can pay for the service through Kaito, but that won't be useful. The main use is going to be to stake Kaito. But yeah, I can give them a lot
Yeah.
of credit on the business side. It's like absolutely genius.
No, absolutely genius. One other failure mode that I see that I haven't really seen anyone talk about, but there's a lot of pre-TGE projects that may not actually have a TGE at some point, or maybe like a lot later. Um, and or if they do have a TGE, it's like going to be a failure, and they may not even airdrop to, to all the yappers like they said they would. And so when you have projects like that make a promise but then don't keep it, like, and that hasn't happened yet, but I can see that happening at some point. Then there's going to be some negative sentiment and some drama, which of course will create more attention, and then it'll just continue to feed the beast. But the yappers who were on those leaderboards, will have a bad taste, and will, I think, reduce some trust.
I hear that. A lot of marketers are turning against, giving away percentages of your token supply for me is like a big no-no. I wish there was some protections for projects almost against their own ignorance to give away, 1-2% of their total token supply over a 3 to 9 month period. For me, that's wild. Like, honestly, that's pretty wild. Projects are doing it.
Yeah. Well, Shad, this is cool, man. I'm excited for the Giga Method, Rare Minds. Any last words you want to share with the audience before we get off?
I'm just curious, what do you think is going to be? So now we're seeing the revenue meta, the club meta. What's Peter's takes? I know you're a big observer. I know you're also getting your hands dirty. What do you think is coming next? And if it is the revenue meta, how will this change the industry?
I'm very excited for the revenue meta. And I hope it actually stays, because I think, to me, it signals two things: that we're growing up as an industry, that we're actually recognizing that revenue is an important thing, and that all these blockchains are actually businesses. These applications are all businesses. And I think we need a wholesale kind of rethinking about what we are doing in blockchain, in crypto. And start using language like business owner. I mean, think about it. If you launch a layer 2, you are a business owner. You're trying to grow your community, you're trying to grow users, you're trying to grow your application, you're trying to make money. Like, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. And so I think just rethinking, and it's a subtle shift, right? Like, you go from like founder to business owner. It should change the way you approach things. And I think that's very healthy. And I think, and I've had this conversation with others in the Ethereum ecosystem, I think one of the biggest missteps the Ethereum Foundation made was it went too heavily on the research side and didn't recognize that layer 2 founders are actually business owners. And once you become a business owner, your primary objective is to grow your project, to grow your company. And accruing value to Ethereum becomes like, takes a kind of a back seat. So it's no longer like what's good for Ethereum. It's about what's good for my project, my company. And I think kind of people failed to see that. And I learned this from when I was actually part of a layer 2 project, and I noticed that the founder was a huge Ethereum. And then the second we launched mainnet, like, it was all about growing applications, users to these applications, user experience. It was growing revenue. It, like, he didn't care about Ethereum at that point. And so, and I think we just, as an industry, just kind of failed to see that. So anyway, so revenue meta, very, very positive. I think shifting our thinking to being entrepreneurs, builders, and business owners, huge unlock, I think. And I think will change kind of how we behave. So it's no longer just about like developers or builders. It's like we're actually building businesses. And it shows that we're just maturing as an industry. And I think it's hugely positive.
Here. Well, you know, a lot of people think that like Ethereum is just so hands off. And there's like a huge call for it now. But you use the word business owner, and I remember back in the day, back in our days, Peter, like you could never say that. That was like straight to jail. Do not pass go. And now it's like a little bit gloves off, right? Like we use the word revenue, for example. You could never use the word revenue before. You couldn't even speak about it. There was no revenue back to a token. That's a dividend. That doesn't pass the Howey test. You're a security, an unregistered security, distributing it
Yeah.
globally. So that's like a big change, right? It's really interesting to see that happen.
Yeah, I love it. And I hope it stays. It's
Yeah,
a
me too.
really, really good unlock. So cool, man. Well, Shad, you're doing good stuff, and appreciate you sharing this resource as a free resource to the community for all marketers, Web 2 and Web 3. I'm going to be diving in and learning,
Ooh.
and I'm sure many others will. So we appreciate you doing this for the community.
Peter, you're being too humble. You have nothing to learn. You're already at the forefront. This will just be
No, the 60-30-10 stuff is amazing. I mean, like most people, like in the focus groups you did. I mean, most people think it's like 90% distribution, right? And forget the rest. So I think there's just things like that, just a different perspective can help us rethink kind of our approach and help us improve. And I appreciate you sharing this free resource for all of us.
Well, thank you for giving me my distribution.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.